Hello everyone. Good morning, Marita.
Good morning.
So today we are getting close to a full moon, and we wanted to talk about the moon and how do we listen to the moon? How do we sync with the moon?
hmm
So it's a beautiful topic. So listening to the moon, what does it inspire you when you hear that? How do you listen to her?
Yeah, well, I am the official apprentice of Lanisan Moonwalker, so of the Moonwalker tradition, which is an Apache tradition, which is also a woven tradition. So when you have the title Moonwalker there's a lot. You walk with the moon. So again, I know we're going to talk about the moon several times, but there's just a few kind of practical things. And we don't just sit with the moon in one phase. We sit with the moon every day, which is a very different practice. We prepare for, the full, the half, the quarters days before,
Hmm.
so if we are getting things, materials together, prayer sticks together, we do so 3 days before leading up and 3 days after. So our full moon or new moon practices or quarter moon practices have days that lead up to it, right? There's preparation for it and afterwards. So we don't just sit with, okay, the full moon is this day and this is the day that we meditate, and listen. And I think that's another thing is like I feel that current culture, um, even those that have uh, uh, big moon practices only look at it as a ritual where you are doing something, you are getting something, you are setting an intention, you are in a moonwalker practices and also the traditions I was born into, you listen to the moon. Not just to give you instructions, but to get to know the moon and for the moon to know you. So it's a long-term relationship, right? And we all have cycles in our life, and the moon shows us how to be constantly in motion, right? Instead of stagnant. And I think it's scary many times because people want solid ground, right? I
Mhm.
want things to stay like this. I don't want them to move. There's too much chaos. But we live in a chaotic world, right? This earth is chaotic, it creates chaotically. And so the moon reminds us that things in this world are not supposed to stay stagnant. They're
Mhm.
always supposed to be shifting. And it's a dance. It's a dance between sky father, the sun, our star, hence we're all star beings on this planet, and the moon dancing in this rhythm back and forth, back in this elliptical movement, right? Back and forth. An eternity, a dance of eternity. How about you?
Yeah, I like that a lot, what you shared. Um, I like the idea of relationship being a disciplined practice, daily practice, and not something just when we can get something out of it. Um, it's interesting because in the Andean cosmology, what people celebrate and do mainly rituals for is the new moon and not the full moon,
Mm,
which is very interesting. The first time I remember many, many years ago learning about it, I was like, oh, it's interesting. How is the Western world spirituality very interested into the full moon? And then we forget about the moon, right, for 1 month. But it's about the maximum and the light and this peak experience, right? Which goes a lot with how we look at spirituality, very often ceremonies, working with plant medicine, things like that, right? It's about a peak experience. It's about, the rising all the time. The idea to work with the new moon is that we're celebrating birth. We're celebrating the beginning of cycles. And in the Andean cosmology, this space that is called Ukupacha is the space of the mother. It's the space of the
Mm,
womb. It's the space of the belly. It's where everything is born from. Even when we have a project, an idea, or sometimes we have those moments where we say, oh, something, I thought about something, comes out of nowhere, right? Nowhere is a kupacha.
mm,
So it's always a tradition that honors the mother, honors the belly, honors the place of creation. Because if we want to work with anything, we need to start where it begins. We can just come up and say, okay, so what are you doing now? And in fact, the full moon, I mean, it's powerful, in many ways we can experience emotion and all of that. But first, as you said, there was a gradient to get there. And the day after, it's already decreasing. It's already the phase of decay, which has, a lot of importance. So, but when we connect to that new moon, first we're honoring the silence, we're honoring the unseen, we're honoring the birth, we're honoring the subconscious, we're honoring what is before, what before things got in motion. And it's really the place of infinite wisdom. It's a great mystery. It's invisible, right? There is high potential. And so we seed our intention with the new moon. In the same way that we do, like me, you work with the land, right? We look at the moon in the same way.
mhm,
So if I want something to grow out of the land, I'm going to work with the energy of the rising moon, right? But if I want to plant something that is going to grow mainly roots and descend, so I'm going to work with the descending phase of the moon,
mhm,
right? And there is, the cycles that come back, every 2 weeks ish, right? We change moon. And so we're attuned more when we work with land with the moon cycle because we can
mhm,
see the effect, right? And for me, um, I think that every time I've connected to the new moon, let's say beginning phases, birthing phases, I get much more relationship, much deeper relationship than just the peak experience. You know,
mhm,
there's something about presence that is required. You don't really see the moon. I mean, if you know where she's in the sky, you can kind of see her because she's masking the stars, and sometimes you can see a little bit of it where
mhm.
she is. Um, but it's much more an inward process. It's much more descent. It's much more about listening than experiencing out there. And to me, that's one of the main foundation of the spiritual path we are walking. It's
Yeah,
always a deeper listening, ultimately, right? To build that relationship you mentioned.
yeah. Living in Hawaii, who Kanaka Maoli follow specific moon calendars every day, right? And it is in relationship to land, when to grow, when to plant, when to fish, but also when to rest.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of the beautiful things, we're always forward moving in this modern world, but there is in the moon and in Hawaii the time of rest, the time to be in between, to sit in the unknown,
Mhm.
right? Today is not a good day to go out there and do that, right? And also a good day to like, my favorite is like to cut, cut hair, cut grass, it'll stay really short for a while. So it's like, you know, those are the days when you do your rituals to be like, okay, I need to be able to see things for a while. So this is the day where I'm going to go and cut my grass, cut my hair and be able to really have an expansive view
Mhm.
um for a while, right? So yeah, I mean, I know we're going to talk about the moon again because we can just talk about her for hours and hours. But I think it's also important to I'll add one more thing is, there are different cultures how they follow the moon. And some will give the full moon to quote unquote women, the dark moon to or vice versa, right? The dark moon to women, full moon to men, and it depends. But the quarter moon for the queer community, for the half moon, actually, they got to sit twice in circle. And that, I think, is a beautiful thing to be able to sit twice, and because of how you presented, how you lived. And that was because it was that time in between where you are half dark, half light, and you're
Mm.
able to embody that. And that's where the queer community and indigenous people sat. That's where there was sacred time. They were the only ones that got to sat in those two half moon phases. So I think that's a beautiful thing, because we think of the phases, right? And we're always just looking for the full. I want to get to the
Mm.
full or I want to get to the dark, right? But we're supposed to be all of those things. And when we allow ourselves that, we allow ourselves to be
Mm.
uniquely, divinely, cosmically, humanly who we are in this time, in this place.
Yeah, I like the idea of the equinox of the moon, this half moon, uh, which are also very important in Indian calendar, right? Celebrating this quarter point, this middle point between the two
Mhm,
extreme. Um, and that's really the red road, right? It's walking the middle way. It's this moments where we're not seeking one or the other. We get to know each of them really well, but we try to walk that middle way. But I was reminded of a story, of we think of the new moon as obviously the bursting of the moon and the beginning of the moon, but on a more cosmos time, if you look at the beginning of life on Earth, it is because of the moon. Now we have discovered that we came out of the ocean.
mhm,
At this new moon, the tides, go back in the ocean quite far, and life was only in the water originally.
mhm,
And those species started, to attach themselves to rocks and all of that, and then the water goes away. And they say that it's what created life on Earth, on the land, because there was this movement. So in many ways, the new moon is what allowed the continuous birthing of life. And the full moon was bringing back, the waters and vice versa. And they say that without the moon, we would probably not have emerged on Earth in the same way or as fast as we did. So I really want to, yeah, honor there's something really beautiful when we think of the moon as birthing life on land, when we think as new moon, this birthing of this cycle, when we think of women and their moon cycle, which
mhm,
is about birthing life. I think when we can weave all those themes together,
mhm,
we can start, yeah, looking at the moon at every step of the way and really walk with her in greater intelligence, in greater relationship, and get to know her better. And yeah, I will finish by that. My teachers say, well, most people in the Western world, they take their crystal out to recharge under the full moon, and that's great. But what about the new moon? What about a whole cycle of the moon? And letting your crystals, like they would be in nature,
mhm.
swallow up the energy of that full cycle, right? And I like this idea because it's probably going to bring back more balance in our path instead of looking for the extreme all the time or paying attention to the extreme. Can we pay attention maybe to what's in between the extreme and find richness there, find teaching there, find wisdom there?
Yeah, and in the traditions I come from, men also have a moon cycle. All people have their own different moon cycles. So I just want to invite everyone to be able to join in their own moon cycle, get to know what that means, right?
Mm,
Physically, emotionally, biologically, and walk and listen to the moon.
mm, beautiful.
Hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Shade.